Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. First up is the WBC interim fight that took place in the junior middleweight division between Patricia Bergult and Hannah Rankin. And much as I predicted, Patricia took home the W, it being that she's a little faster than Hannah, a little bit more mobile, a little bit more athletic, a little bit more aggressive, and I figured that's going to be enough for Patricia to secure a spot, a title shot at what is the full title. The full title that is vacant at the moment, but will be on the line early next year in the upcoming fight between Shields versus Habazin. We all know why that fight got postponed. We all know what the situation is. And, you know, for Hannah, I think the best thing to do now, moving forward, is perhaps a move upstairs to the middleweight division. It being that, you know, those titles that Shields is in possession of, at least a few of them are going to become vacant very soon, and they will be available for someone to fight for. She could be that someone, one of those someones up there at middleweight that could become a champion as a result. Right now, the state of the junior middleweight division does not favor Hannah. I can't give Hannah any kind of odds to beat a Raquel Miller, a Marie-Eve DeCur, a Hannah Gabriels, or a Shields in a rematch, which is likely what would have happened had Hannah won this interim fight. You know, the winner of the fight will be the mandatory challenger for the green belt that Clarissa Shields, in all likelihood, is very close to procuring. So perhaps for Hannah, the best thing to do now is to move upstairs where the competition isn't so stiff, but there will be some world titles available very soon for her to fight for. So just congratulations to Patricia Bergult for living up to my expectations. This is what I figured would happen, and that's exactly what did happen. We then come to the welterweight contest between the undisputed welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus and Victoria Bustos, the challenger who had so moved up in weight to see if she could get her hands on those brass rings. And much as I predicted, much as I expected, this was a lopsided affair. You know, Victoria Bustos is not cut out to campaign as a welterweight, let alone against the caliber of fighter that Cecilia Brækhus is. And the performance was a curious performance because it was definitely dominant on Cecilia Brækhus' part, though not all that ambitious. You know, I expected a little more. You know, there's a moral victory somewhere in there for Bustos, who was clearly out of place in the welterweight division, going the distance with a world-class athlete, world-class champion, the most decorated woman boxer in the history of women's boxing, Cecilia Brækhus. There's a moral victory there for Bustos, having gone the distance. But if this is possible, it's only made possible because Cecilia has peaked already. It's like people don't really realize that Cecilia is 40 years old, and if she's not, she's pushing it. You know, so she's up there in age, she's well past her prime, yet she's still the most dominant force at the weight. So there's something to be said about that yes, it was a dominant showing, though not the most ambitious, but you do have to remember that Cecilia's up there in age. I don't think that Victoria Bustos would have gone the full course, the full 10 rounds, with the same Cecilia Brækhus that stopped Sofiane Mathis in the rematch, the same Cecilia Brækhus who stopped Oxandia Castillo on the heels of Oxandia stopping Hannah Gabriels. I don't think Victoria would have gone the distance with Cecilia years ago, but here today, you know, Cecilia's pushing 40, so there's going to be some slippage, there's going to be some decline, and I think that's how we can explain the complacent yet dominant performance. Though it wasn't without its exciting moments. You know, Cecilia did score a knockdown off a very short left hand as Victoria was mid-range to inside, you know, trying to land a shot. She got caught off balance and sent reeling into the turnbuckle off a very short left hand from Brækhus. So there's still some power there, and her ring IQ is ever present, even if her reflexes and her power is waning. She's still one of the most polished boxers in the sport and the most decorated in the sport. So, you know, it wasn't a performance that wowed me, but it still highlights how, even at this age, Cecilia Brækhus is very dominant. Context is key here. You know, you don't just relegate Cecilia Brækhus as a boxer to this one performance, to this one fight. No, she's been a world champion since 2009, an undisputed champion since 2014, and she's still an undisputed champion here today. So while this wasn't the most ambitious showing for Cecilia, she was no less dominant. This was a fight that she was in full control of, never in trouble.
At any point.
I mean, it wasn't remotely competitive. You know, Bustos, she resorted to, you know, loading up on single shots and trying to salvage the fight by, I guess, looking for the knockout. And these were telegraphed shots that were easy to read, easy to avoid, and easy to counter. So, you know, it was everything I expected. It was lopsided, though I would have hoped to see a little more from Brækhus, but, you know, can't be critical of someone who's been as dominant as she has all these years. The interesting bit of this performance is it lends insight into what the future might hold. That yes, Cecilia beat Bustos as expected, but there does appear to be some decline, some slippage. And moving forward, we know that Cecilia's got a Katie Taylor fight on the brain, and we know that Katie Taylor's got a Cecilia Brækhus fight on the brain. They're both on the same side of the street. They're fighting on the DAZN side of things, so in all likelihood, this is a fight that gets made. And given Cecilia Brækhus' slippage, the fact that there are signs of decline there, I mean, it was a dominant showing, but she's looked better. Given these particulars, there is a chance that she may just be unseated by the likes of a Katie Taylor. And this is something we're going to have to discuss in another video as to, why that is. Why is that and how does it happen? But for now, congratulations for yet another successful title defense for the undefeated, undisputed champion at welterweight, Cecilia Brækhus. We then come to one of yesterday's upset. At least I consider it an upset. And it's mostly because, I didn't give the fight much thought. Had I, perhaps I would have seen the signs that, Zolani Tete would be defeated, unseated, that the title was going to change hands. But like I said, I didn't give the fight much thought, didn't pick a pony in the show. But, I guess you could say, hindsight being 2020, the ingredients were there. Zolani Tete, former WBO champion Zolani Tete, he hadn't been in action in about a year. Over a year, actually. A year and a month. Last time this guy was in action was back in October of last year against Aloyan in what was the World Boxing Super Series. And he hadn't had a fight since. We know he got injured, and he was recuperating, this, that, and the other. So he comes back, and he's coming back against a puncher that has stopped his last 5 opponents. Casimero, who is promoted by none other than Manny Pacquiao. And the ingredients are there that, if you haven't had a fight in a while, you got some ring rust to shake off, you don't so decide to shake it off with a guy who stopped his last 5 opponents, a puncher, a sizable puncher. And that's what Casimero was, And, the first 2 rounds of this thing, they were relatively quiet, with Zolani Tete attempting to pick off the smaller Casimero at long range, using his jab, using his height, and it's the right plan of action, whether there's ring rust or no ring rust. That's how you go about it. If you're the taller fighter, you use that height, you use that reach, and don't make things harder on yourself. Least of all against the puncher, who has stopped his last 5 opponents. So Zolani had the right idea. It's just that his durability didn't seem to be there for him. Third round, things escalated very quickly off a series of right hands from Casimero, and Zolani just never recovered from that initial knockdown. Pretty sure it was a headshot that did the job, because, a body shot, it's not going to affect your equilibrium, whereas a headshot did, and Zolani Tete, his equilibrium was so effective. He had the spaghetti legs. From there on out, never quite bounced back. He was dropped 2 times by Casimero in the 3rd round, and, I don't use ring rust as an avenue to excuse Zolani Tete losing his title to Casimero. I'm not trying to denigrate Casimero's victory. In all honesty, perhaps Casimero would have always beat him. But there is something to be said about a fighter who's been out of action, who's been out about a year, and he goes in there against an aggressive puncher, the likes of a Casimero, that does amplify things. The threat level is thereby amplified when you haven't been doing much for a year, you've been taking it easy, trying to recuperate, and then you go in there against a killer like Casimero. Sean Gibbons and Manny Pacquiao now have a world champion on their hands who's in the mix of everything. He's in the mix of that Inoue conversation. I'll say that I would like to see, Casimero square off against Nordin Ubali. I'll take the unification matches in whatever way they come, but given the style mashup between Casimero and Ubali, I think that would be a titillating fight, and I think that Inoue's fight with Donaire was a hard enough fight that a lighter touch would be warranted, that I wouldn't hold it against him if he took his foot off the gas a bit and let those 2 guys unify, that, hey, I'm a champion, but I'm a unified champion. You guys should unify, and then I'll get the winner of the fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it happen in that order. I think Ubali versus Casimero would be a titillating fight, a great fight. And, I wouldn't mind seeing it happen that way. But I reiterate, I'll take the unifications in whatever fashion they come, whether it's Inoue versus Ubali, then Inoue versus Casimero, or Casimero versus Ubali, then the winner gets Inoue. I'll take it how it comes. I'll say that it was a sensational, albeit abrupt, showing from Casimero, who proved once again that, a good right hand, it can be a southpaw's kryptonite, a southpaw's worst enemy, because it was that series of right hands
that really hurt Zolani and got the ball rolling.
And it is for this reason that I'm thinking, perhaps Casimero would have always had his number, but the ring rust really amplified it. That the punch resistance of Zolani Tete, it just wasn't there for him. He's been taking it easy. He gets hit real hard, and it's more than he could deal with at this point in the juncture. Because the fight ended rather quickly, and it got off to a very slow start. It was a rather uneventful first 2 rounds, and then all of a sudden, people are getting knocked down. Guys are losing their equilibrium, all kinds of stuff. So just congratulations to Casimero for unseating Zolani Tete. What is a multi-division champion? He's been a champion in more than one weight class. A very credible scalp for Casimero to establish himself on the scene, and now he's in the mix of everything. We then come to yet another upset that took place yesterday involving some form or another of a WBO title, the junior middleweight contest between Carlos Adames and Patrick Teixeira, a fight where I actually did pick a pony in the show. I felt like Carlos Adames had everything it took to become the WBO's interim champion, to thereby be elevated to full champion at the upcoming WBO convention. Well, apparently, Patrick Teixeira had something to say about that. And, you often hear about a fighter's ability.
His skill set.
What he's capable of, offensively, defensively, athleticism, all kinds of stuff. You often hear about a fighter's ability, but in the case of Carlos Adames, it wasn't about ability so much as durability, or the lack thereof. That seemed to be Carlos Adames' problem, the accumulated damage he suffered at the hands of Patrick Teixeira, resulting in a 7th round knockdown that he never quite recovered from. The first half of the fight was definitely Carlos Adames', with Patrick Teixeira coming on in the latter half, and that's when he did the business. Most of the latter half of the fight, Carlos Adames' legs were looking kind of stringy. He's, kind of on Queer Street there, showing the spaghetti legs. He never quite recovered from that knockdown in the 7th, battling back as best as he could, though not enough to win the fight. You hear it said often that, at a certain level, all these guys can punch, and I guess that, Carlos Adames found that out the hard way, that he's got his virtues. He's got a strong punch, good boxing ability, good athleticism, but it's his durability and his powers of recovery, or the lack thereof, that failed him in this situation. This doesn't have to be the end of the world for Carlos Adames. It's one loss, and plenty of fighters have bounced back in the past from more than just one loss. So he's entirely capable of staying in the conversation of the upper echelon guys at 154. It's just that, durability is one of those things that, you kind of need it. You can't go the duration of a 12-round fight and something doesn't get through. Something is bound to get through, and you've got to be able to weather it. You've got to be able to deal with it. And for Carlos, that seems to be the issue.
It's what costed him.
It really surprised me, because I reiterate, I thought Carlos had everything it took to win that fight and snag that belt. Subsequently, lining himself up for the full title or being elevated to it. I thought, it was a pretty comfortable pick. And it was surprising, the way things worked out. So I guess it's back to the drawing board for Carlos.
Yeah, pretty much.
Perhaps I underestimated Patrick Teixeira's desire to join the upper echelon conversation, and he surprised me. So let's see what the future's got in store for him. We then come to what was the super featherweight debut of former 2-division champion Carl Frampton against the young greenhorn, Tyler McCreary. And I want to preface everything I'm about to say with this. Carl looked absolutely sensational, showing all the different levels he has as a former champion, a seasoned veteran, the level at which he has competed opposite of, Tyler McCreary, who in many ways was a young greenhorn. That, yes, he's got height, he's got reach, and he's a fresher fighter, but he's not more experienced, and experience is really what beat Tyler McCreary. I want to say that, Tyler fought the wrong fight. Allowing Carl Frampton to get mid-range to inside on him, work his body, hurt him there, take him down there, causing him to take a knee 2 times throughout the course of the match. If you're going to be statuesque for the weight, it's all for nothing if you don't use it, if you don't use that height, if you don't use that reach, if you don't fight behind a judicious jab to keep the smaller man out. Yet time and time again throughout the course of this fight, that's not what Tyler McCreary did. He engaged Carl Frampton in the pocket. You're already giving up half the fight to him if you go in there doing that. And I dare say that if Carl Frampton is to face Jamel Herring in his very next fight, in contention for Jamel's WBO title, well, this was a decent prelude because, Tyler McCreary, much like Jamel Herring, is a statuesque jabber. But the difference, the tiebreaker as it were, is that Jamel Herring has competed at a much higher level than Tyler McCreary, having gone the distance with a sizable puncher in Masayoshi Ito and neutralizing that guy's power, okay? That's the kind of experience that Tyler doesn't have. Just as well, Tyler is an orthodox fighter, whereas Jamel is a southpaw. A southpaw to where, you know, the smaller man in Carl Frampton may struggle to get mid-range to inside in all the ways that he did with Tyler, because Jamel's jab is going to be coming over the top of his.
Carl's jab.
You know, it's going to be the battle of lead foot advantage, and Jamel being the much more statuesque, much more taller, rangier, athletic, mobile guy, I don't think Carl is going to have his way with Jamel in all the ways he had his way with Tyler. It's just, you know, it's a different kettle of fish, but it is the right kind of fight, facing a statuesque jabber who's not necessarily a volume guy, because Tyler's not a volume guy, and neither is Jamel. So it's a good prelude, though, you know, Jamel is a higher caliber of fighter than Tyler. Thus, I think it was good preparation in facing young Tyler McCreary, but one must be mindful that regardless of how Carl looked, Tyler is a greenhorn and Jamel is not. Tyler is inexperienced in all the ways that Jamel is not. Jamel is experienced, he's a reigning champion, a better, more accurate jabber, and a more precision operator than Tyler has had the opportunity to show. Thus, if Carl is to face Jamel in his very next fight, well, I still favor Jamel, regardless of where it takes place, whether it's here in America or over there in Carl Frampton's backyard. I still feel that Jamel is the favorite to win that fight. And finally, we come to yet another contest where a featherweight was making his super featherweight debut, the fight between Oscar Valdez and Adam Lopez, a fight that I wasn't sure Lopez was ready for, given that he took it on short notice, but he certainly proved me wrong, didn't he? Look, the winner of the fight, as far as who won the fight, I might have got that right, but Adam Lopez showed his levels. He showed that he's ready to be in that upper echelon conversation
at 130.
At 130 pounds, even though he insists he'll be doing his fighting at 126. Better still, you know, Oscar, he showed the same defensive deficiencies that I'm always talking about, that, you know, he's a fun fighter to watch as far as an aesthetic, but in the realm of longevity, Oscar's defensive deficiencies, the fact that he was dropped yet again, had to pick himself up off the canvas, you know, it denotes what could be him courting disaster if he is to face Miguel Berchelt, because I'll tell you, Adam's a good kid, but he's no Miguel Berchelt. It's not a sustained attack behind relentless punching power in all the ways it would be with El Alacran. I also have to say that I didn't agree with that referee's stoppage. That Adam had done enough in the early goings of the fight that the referee should have given him a bit more consideration, even if he was looking hurt, even if he did look to be on Queer Street and was knocked down. Don't forget that he scored a knockdown of his own. So let the boys do their thing and let the guys fight. I understand that, you know, everybody's got cases like Patrick Day and Maxim Dadashev in the back of their minds. They don't want to see another one of those tragic realities, tragic reminders of how dangerous the sport of boxing is. But, you know, most people agree that Adam looked like he had more in the tank, and even if he was hurt, he could have been saved by the bell, and his powers of recovery might have caused him to win the subsequent round thereafter. He was robbed of the opportunity to get back in this fight, and I don't agree with that stoppage, though I understand what might have motivated it. But just back to Oscar Valdez and what he's shown now that he's at 130 pounds. You know, I felt he wasn't cut out for that weight given his style, given his tendencies, and I think we got a glimpse of that yesterday, and I think there's going to be more to come as that Miguel Berchelt fight approaches. We'll talk more about it in another video.